good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Chief Coordinator, Dakshin, Global South Center of Excellence. Director General, हमारा yes, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, he is traveling. He might join in between. He was supposed to join at 5 o'clock. He has some meeting somewhere. Hopefully, he'll be joining in between. But we can start this particular workshop on empowering the future women-led development for inclusive growth in the Global South. As some of you have also been joining attended some of our earlier webinars. This is the first one on women-related issues, but we have been, working on many other issues. Particularly in the last 1 year, we had more than a dozen workshops, online workshop on issues concerning agriculture, digital solutions, health issues. But now we are also moving into many more areas. Last major workshop we also had just 2 days back was on circular economy, and we will continue to also work in many other areas, particularly in the digital, particularly in the climate technologies, and also in the connectivity infrastructure, and also of course on gender empowerment or women-led development. Welcome to this workshop. I'm really glad that we have large number of speakers, those who have really responded, and we also have many think tanks from our partners who are participating in this webinar. Since we have started our journey at the Global South Center of Excellence, I'm glad to share with you that we have more than 143 think tanks, those are our partners, in more than 85, 86 countries. And more than 60 are in Africa, close to 30 in Latin America, and of course in other parts of the world. So this particular workshop is about women-led development. We are quite familiar, in fact, the narratives and approaches to feminism in academia, because I am a professor at the university, so we have been discussing all those, whether we're talking about liberal feminism or radical feminism, black feminism, post-colonial feminism, and also ecofeminism. And I am also a professor of European studies, so I've been part of some of the projects concerning feminist foreign policy. But apart from all these, what I call the mainstream or later discourses on feminism, there are of course various different kind of discourse what we have in the Global South. And women issues, these narratives are obviously rooted in their own histories, in their colonial histories, and also their own socio-political and economic conditions. So obviously there are different kind of, and there is also plenty of activism also you can find on women issues, women activism, feminism within Global South countries. But here we are talking about something different, which is women-led development. Now, this idea was also, very much came into the prominence during India's G20 presidency. So here we are talking about how countries, in fact, most countries in the Global South, they talk about women empowerment. And most of them, almost all of them are also part of SDGs. So SDG 5, which is women equality, is also very much part of every country's agenda. But what we are talking here is about women as agents of change rather than just passive beneficiaries of what the government policies and government schemes are. So here, the idea has been that how they are also part of planning and implementation process of all government policies. And it's not just integrating them into the development, but also reimagining development with women at the center of decision-making processes. So here we are not talking about women-led means that a country has to be led by women and then only it's a women-led development. But here the question is how at a different layers of planning and implementation process of various government schemes and also all kinds of processes what we have, how women can be really part of that, not just only part of that, in fact, the leading role taking. And if you look at India in our own history of Panchayati Raj institutions and many other, a large number of women are in a leading position to take decisions about their daily life. So these are some of the issues we are going to discuss today in this workshop. And now I will invite my colleague, Dr. Beena Pandey. She's a visiting fellow at RIS, and for decades she has been working on women-related issues. She would be moderating the first session, which is up to 5:45, where in fact we have some speakers from India, those who would be talking about broader issues and also some of the issues of women-led development, particularly the policy relevant areas within India. Over to you, Dr. Beena.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I'm Dr. Beena Pandey from RIS. RIS is a leading think tank, as you all know, that it's a leading think tank. It's an autonomous body of Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. And I'm honored and privileged to be part of this very important workshop, Empowering the Future of Human-Led Development for Inclusive Growth in the Global South. And equally, I'm also thankful to our DG, Director General, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, and Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Chief Coordinator, Dakshin, Global South Center of Excellence, RIS, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this very important workshop. And this subject, women-led development, is very dear to my heart. As all of you are aware that India during its G20 presidency has sensitized the whole world about the women-led development. And what does that mean, women-led development? Women-led development means that they are not mere passive beneficiaries of social protection policies or any flagship programs, but they should be on the design board. In the design board, they should be designing the policies for the women. So my submission is that in this, first of all, if we are talking about the women empowerment, it doesn't mean that we have only focus on education is there, health is there, entrepreneurship is there, but we should not be working in the silos. India, we are just focusing on, like, even if the girl child is going to a school, so we have to take care of her transport, of her food security, nutrition, everything should be taken care of. It should not, we can't work in a silos for the women empowerment. And first thing is that women-led development, we know that global female labor force participation was only 48%. And as our concept note has already mentioned, that only 10.4% of CEO positions at Fortune 500 companies. And here, most of 70% of women workforce are in the health sector, but they are just the nurses and the midwives. So exactly, we have to push women to be they are in the STEM education. Like India is focusing on NEP. NEP means New Education Policy 2020, and we are focusing for the girls' education. We are giving education in the multilingual languages, and India is working from the beginning also. We have to start their education in a proper manner so that they can be in the STEM. Though some problems are there in rural areas, but still Indian women are just leading the spaceship program. They are in the medical doctors, they are in the armed forces, but we have to strengthen that approach. And Global Gender Gap Report, the World Economic Forum 2024, according to them, it will take 134 years to close the gender gap in that. And in UN UNICEF report, I was just reading that there are 70% of jobs which worldwide have a digital component. So for that, we have to still reskill our women forces. I'll not take much time. We have a very eminent panelist for all this. Our first session will be from the perspectives from India. We have a first speaker is Professor Anuradha Chinoy, and she is a distinguished academic and policy expert in international relations, peace and conflict studies, and gender and security. She is the former dean of the School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has authored several influential books and research papers, including works on civil society, conflict transformation, and the role of international institutions. She is a strong advocate for inclusive and sustainable peace. Professor Chinoy has engaged with international organizations such as UN and various NGOs. So, ma'am, we have in this 7 to 8 minutes for every speaker. So, my first speaker, Professor Anuradha Chinoy, floor is for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Beena, for this very extended introduction. Professor Gulshan Sachdev, Beena ji, distinguished co-panelists. I'm very grateful that RIS has organized this webinar and that it is on women-led development for inclusive growth. Now, of course, it's not necessary even to say, and I think everyone knows that research has established that now women-led growth is essential for inclusive growth. But I'm going a step further from what I've seen in recent research to state that women's equal participation in labor and development goals lead not just to better gender inclusive indexes and to better human development indices, but they also lead to increasing and improving the general growth patterns and GDPs of countries. However, Beena mentioned the UN development reports, etc. The last 2-3 years, and that comes out in this UN World Survey also, and in the last few years, human development reports, that show that these repeated shocks ever since COVID, then the wars in Europe and West Asia, have led to a large, almost 50% more women living under conflict, an increase of women in impoverished situations, especially in the global south, reflecting really greater inequalities in access to economic resources, greater responsibilities, more unpaid work, gender-based violence, and a desperate need to put the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, back on track because these haven't moved in the last 2 or 3 years. At the same time, day before yesterday, SIPRI released its World Military Expenditures Report, which shows the massive increase worldwide of military defense expenditures to over trillions of dollars, which shows what? That resources are available, but they are being used for other purposes. So I think in my conclusion, I will make a plea that as women in development, we also address that these resources be rechanneled to women and the SDGs. Of course, poverty rates vary, and there's a lot of gender, and not only gender inequalities, as Beena, you showed in your introduction, that you do have women in so many new professions. You have women in leadership, you have women in security, you have security sector reforms. But within that, there is inequality because in a lot of things, women remain absent. So there is a great need to focus on this, and it is going to take 100 years to get even the kind of equity or equality that we are asking for. So, you know, this whole thing of women, the need for protection, prevention, and promotion at both micro, meso, and macro levels is essential. But in the midst of these negative reports of the last 2-3 years, there's also something positive, and I'm going to point out one interesting case, and that is a case in India, where if you see the annual report this year's of the National Sample Survey, the NSSO office, that has something very interesting, and that is that after a long period of stagnation, that is from 2011, 2012, there has been a dominant and significant recovery. And this recovery is there in both genders. So while, for example, men's work participation in India increased slightly from 71% in 2017 to 17-18 to 76% in 2023-24. For women in India, this rate went up from a very low and usual, which was there for years, 22% in the labor force, and to 2017-2018 to reach in 2024 to 40.3%, which means a dramatic 80% rise in 6 years. This is for women working, 15 years and above. So I think it is an amazing kind of statistic. But of course, it also, and I think India would congratulate itself that the number of women in the workforce has increased from this kind of stagnant position. But there are also some issues, and that is the categories where the highest increase is in the unpaid workers and family enterprises and in the informal sectors. So while this is not domestic workers or domestic labor, the increase is in these small enterprises, businesses, and women doing self-employment, and so on. Now, interestingly, this rise matches with the rise in the number of women and young girls in primary and secondary education, and how these numbers have matched up. So I looked up the old human development reports, and you can see that in the 2008 human development report, for example, in the gender equality index for education, there were only 26% girls who did their 12 years of basic education. So maybe let's say from nursery to class 10. Whereas 50% of boys were enrolled and actually completed 12 years of education. But you find again an increase in this. Now in 2022, in the gender equality index of the 2022 human development report, this basic school education for girls became the same as that of boys. Then that's remarkable. So it was 70 to 73% for girls and 74-75% for boys. So you can see that many of the schemes and many of the programs to include women actually do work. And I think that's a goal that the Global South can draw upon, because they do talk of, this fast GDP in India. Of course, for that, you require social cohesion, you require social protection, you need rights, but it also works. But at the same time, there's one disturbing index, and that is about the GNP per capita, where but in India, it's only about 3% to men having 10% GNP per capita. And compare this to Vietnam, for example, where for women, it is at 9.6%, and for men, 10.69% of the GNP per capita. So women's incomes in Vietnam, for example, have gone up much more sharply, similarly in Malaysia compared to India. So what does that show? That while women are increasing in the tertiary and primary and secondary sectors, they're going to schools, they are joining the labor market, yet we have to make sure that they get their correct remuneration. Obviously, they're not being remunerated, especially because they're mostly in the informal sector. So there's just a lot of inequality. So therefore, I'm concluding, just as you started in this webinar, that it is very important for this social exclusion, for there to be social cohesion, conflict-free and a supportive environment, the direct benefit schemes, access to digitization, and support structures, special gendered support structures like daycare centers for children, maternity care, etc., which need to correct and improve these imbalances. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chinon. You have touched upon really important issues, like inequality is there, but if we really want to improve the labor force participation, there should not be a gap between the tertiary and the employability. And for that, India has advocated in G20 that care economy we should literally focus on. There, we should be facilitating the women. There is a very important mismanagement between to balance the personal life and the outside work. This is the main reason for women that they are not going outside. So we have to balance that thing, personal life and the outside work. Thank you, Professor Chinon. And now I'll move on to the next speaker, Professor Pami Dua, and she is a senior. Has she joined here? Yes, she is there. Welcome, Professor Pami Dua. She is a senior professor of economics and former director of the Delhi School of Economics. She has been a member of the first Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI from 2016 to 2020. She has served as co-chair of the Task Force on Macroeconomics, Trade and Livelihoods under G20 India in 2023. She earlier served as the president of the Indian Econometric Society and as the India coordinator of the United Nations Global Forecasting Model, Project Link. She has also served as editor of the Indian Economic Review, Journal of the Delhi School of Economics. She is a distinguished, right now she is a distinguished fellow of the research and of RIS, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi, and a member of the Governing Council of the Center for Advanced Financial Research and Learning. She is also a senior research fellow with the Economic Cycle Research Institute in New York. And Professor Pami Dua will be focusing on the role of women in achieving sustainable development goals. So, Professor Pami Dua, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beena ji, and Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Professor Gulshan Sachdev. I'm very grateful that such a wonderful webinar has been organized on the empowering the future on women-led development for inclusive growth in the Global South. And I'm also grateful to you for inviting me to be a panelist. So as was pointed out by Dr. Beena Pandey, I will be speaking about role of women in achieving SDGs, and this is applicable to the entire Global South. So as we know, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the world in 2015 encompass a roadmap for progress that is sustainable and leaves no one behind. While gender equality and women's empowerment is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, this goal is also integral to all dimensions of inclusive and sustainable development, since each of the SDGs depends on the achievement of goal number 5 of gender equality and women's empowerment. In other words, by empowering women and achieving gender equality, we may be better equipped to handle economic, social, and environmental challenges such as poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental conservation, geopolitical crises, healthcare, etc. This is because women may be more committed to bring about change as well as provide novel ideas, strong leadership, and competent decision making to resolve the issues. Thus, gender inequality not only holds women back, it also prevents the world from making progress towards sustainable development. Further, since women constitute a sizable proportion, that is nearly half of the global population, they are on the front lines of development goals. It is also essential to acknowledge that gender equality must be addressed through an intersectional lens. Women from marginalized communities, such as indigenous groups, rural areas, and persons with disabilities, face layered and compounded forms of exclusion. Furthermore, bridging the gender digital divide is crucial in today's economy, especially in the global south, where women continue to have lower access to digital tools and the internet. Increasing digital literacy, mobile connectivity, and online participation empowers women economically and socially. Additionally, women are key actors in climate resilience, particularly in agriculture and natural resource management, yet they often lack a voice in environmental decision making. Their inclusion in green innovation, sustainable practices, and climate leadership is vital. Further, in conflict affected and fragile contexts, women have also played critical roles in peace building and crisis response, yet their contributions remain under-recognized. Elevating women's roles in crisis recovery, peace negotiations, and humanitarian responses is essential for long-term stability and resilience. To illustrate the impact of gender equality across sustainable development goals, I present a couple of examples. First, SDG Goal 2, Zero Hunger. This goal implies that all women should be able to consume sufficient food with adequate nutrition. With a reduction in gender discrimination, women working in agriculture should be able to contribute more towards global food security. Recent United Nations data indicates that globally there are about 48 million more women than men who are food insecure. However, by closing the gender gap in farm productivity as well as the wage gap, the number of food insecure people can go down by about the same number. Now I move on to SDG goal number 5, which is on gender equality. Now, this goal recognizes the critical role that women play in achieving SDGs, since gender equality and women's empowerment are reflected in many targets as both the objective and the solution. Some global findings based on United Nations data are as follows. First, discriminatory legal frameworks prevail in many countries. Second, globally, women spend 2.5 times as many hours a day versus men on unpaid care and domestic work. Third, globally in 2023, women held less than 35% seats in parliaments and local governments and 28% of managerial positions. Fourth, women account for less than 40% of owners of agricultural land in many countries. And five, other challenges include limited access to education and healthcare, physical violence, gender wage gaps, gender digital divide, and gender gap in farm productivity, etc. I would like to point out some recommendations to advance women's empowerment towards the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. First, we can implement gender-responsive policies and legal reforms that eliminate discrimination and promote equity. Second, we can promote women's leadership and participation at all levels of governance, business, and civil society. Third, we can invest in capacity building and skills training to enable women's full economic participation. Fourth, we can foster values-driven change through awareness campaigns and education, encouraging a lifestyle for sustainable development, which was adopted during the India G20 23 meetings in India. Fifth, we can adopt localized community-based approaches that are culturally relevant and scalable from the grassroots to regional, national, and global levels. To conclude this, empowering women is not just a matter of equity. It is a strategic imperative for achieving sustainable, inclusive development. A future led by women is a future of shared prosperity and resilience for all. So thank you very much. I had more examples of SDGs, but due to paucity of time, I have skipped those. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pamidua. For SDGs, gender is a cross-cutting issue in all the goals. So we whatever the goals we have, 17 goals. So we have there should be a gender concern in each and every goal. And all the recommendations are well taken, and we'll be working on that also. Thank you, Professor Pamidua. Now I will move to our next speaker, Nandita Barua. Nandita Barua is a country representative in India, the Asia Foundation, and she has over 35 years of experience working in the development sector in Asia. She is currently the India country head at the Asia Foundation, an international development agency with offices in 18 Asian countries. She leads the foundation's work in India, focusing on trade and economic growth, environmental resilience, international development, education, and leadership and women's empowerment. Prior to her posting in India, Nandita held leadership positions in the Asia Foundation country offices in Cambodia and Nepal. Nandita has worked in senior technical and leadership positions with several multilateral and bilateral development agencies across South Asia, such as UNODC, UN Women, SIDA, and USAID. Nandita Barua will be focusing on gender integration in the economic growth story of the global South. So Nandita, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beenaji. Namaskar, everybody. Been a pleasure, and thank you, Dakshina Rai and Gulshan, for having me here today. Is my voice audible?
Yes, fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think the former speakers before me have actually focused quite eloquently on the need, on why we need to have women at the center of the story of growth, both economic and social, and also larger integration. I'm going to just focus on a couple of more specific issues that I think are going to be critical, whether it's related to SDG or just general concerns around more equity and more inclusion in any part of the world, global south, global north, whatever, wherever, how we want to look at. Let me begin by just, one, reiterating a few numbers and also putting out a few out for everybody to ponder about for a minute. Female labor force participation, Dr. Chinoy very aptly pointed out. I think it's interesting. We had a 22 point percentage growth in 17-18. Now in a very short span of time, it has increased between 2023-24, when the last report was tabled by the finance minister in Jan 25, around 41, approximately 42%. A large push, and of course, clearly said that push has also happened because of two things. One, I think there's been a better capture of women workforce than it was previously. Secondly, I think that definitional grayness between whether you call a woman a formal or an informal labor, that was also something that was addressed, because I think when we look at a workforce in a developing country, a lot of the very critical work, say when you're looking at agriculture as the sector, a lot of the critical work in the agricultural sector is done by women, but unfortunately they don't get defined as a workforce. They just get left out as informal. And I think that kind of course correction is a process that we are, at least in India, I can say we are looking to undertake and really identify. And because if you don't identify women in workforces at different level in labor forces, they will never have a seat at the table because they're not considered as a workforce. And therefore capturing whatever work they do is extremely important. And I think that's been an important indicator. But at the same time, there has also been a push for actually women to get into more small work, enterprise, skill development that has been going on extensively through various schemes and programs. The next figure I want to point out, so this is a positive story. I think there is a lot happening, but a lot needs to be done because it's still areas where women are working. Are those adequately representative of the actual economic contributions those sectors are making? And are women getting their due in relation to what contribution that particular industrial sector or agricultural sector is making to the economy? Just to give an example, for example, in many countries where migration contributes hugely to GDP, and a lot of women are in the are migrants who are sending money back, whether you look at Philippines or Nepal, there is still a lot of challenges in actually empowering women to be a skilled worker, even to go out. It's not to say you don't go out as a worker, but are you doing enough to empower them to go out as a skilled worker? And are we counting their contribution to the GDP and making those facilities back home for them to utilize, the benefits they've brought to the country for their own economic growth in the country or outside of the country? Those questions still remain unanswered because there is a certain mindset which prefers not to or chooses not to capture some of those challenging information and data and present it in a policy framework. Another set of data, I think in India, we have close to 63 million micro, small, medium enterprises. Of this, 20% or a little more, maybe 20% is a slightly dated data, it could be about 20-25% are women-led MSMEs. So 20-25% of 62 million is a huge sector of women in medium and small industries. And this is a particular sector where a lot of focus and impetus would be needed for any country, even a country like India, if you are looking to accelerate your growth engine. Because small and medium industries actually become the value chain for the larger industries that operate. A lot of outsourcing happens to small and medium industries, even from the bigger manufacturing industrial sector, export-oriented, non-export-oriented, all of it. And here again, I think giving the right push to women to be able to be a critical voice in the policies that relate to medium and small industries is extremely, extremely important. We are focusing a lot on the skilling part of it. We are focusing a lot on the credit part of it available to women. But I think the next step will be to really focus at what are the high-level policy corrections required to make the MSME sector a critical sector for women to be just more conclusively involved in. What would that do? That would actually integrate global value chain in the industry across countries. So when we look at trade, when we look at exports across countries, I think the MSMEs have a very important role currently, at least in the South Asian context. And I can say that. It's also interesting that the National Trade Facilitation Action Plan of India, NTA FAP 2023, actually has 27 Action point 27 talks about aims to improve women's gender inclusiveness in trade. So what do we need to do? I mean, there is the points are there. It clearly states that you need to conceptualize and develop a women in global business program, aim at capacity building and connectivity, provide information and resources and mentoring program, connection and communication across the board for women, Indian women. And interestingly, actually, there was also an all-women Central Board of Indirect Taxation and Customs set up. So certain things have been done, but sometimes I think while the policy or a forward-looking document or a plan may say a lot of things, it needs to be backed not just by certain higher level economic opportunities, but also much more awareness, much more opportunities right from the beginning, which are sometimes hindered by social barrier. So access to tech education, for example, access to understanding export markets, easy information on movements of goods, cross-border ports that are sensitive to women. We did a study, DAF did a study once on, gender sensitivity across border ports between India, Bangladesh, Nepal. And it wasn't surprising to say that none of these cross-border transit points are gender sensitive. For example, none of them even have a decent women's toilet. Or none of the people who are at the checkpost have ever been told about, how do you deal with women if there is a women exporter, importer crossing the line or has goods going through. Barely any women seen in any of the key position posts at these places. So those act as deterrents for women who are already, pressed down by a larger perspective of patriarchy to engage in even something as simple as being a part of a cross-border value chain trade. Interestingly, what happens is we've also found in some studies where the industry itself might be owned by women, but when it comes to marketing the products, it's the men who take it over because of all these other barriers which makes them uncomfortable in accessing these spaces. So here is the thing. We have a lot in the policy space. We are focusing on women-led development, but it needs to be backed at multiple levels. It needs to be backed by creating a mentoring space for women. It can't remain a story where a woman helps a woman. That's not the story. The entire ecosystem of trade, economic growth, labor force, men who are at the forefront now need to come forward to be able to facilitate the process where women take the center stage in the economic growth. There is no way any country with the world or a country with 50% women can succeed immensely in an equitable manner in the economic area if women are left behind. We still don't have globally in the global south enough. I mean, in fact, the percentage of women who are at the seat in the high table where trade deals, trade negotiations, gender policies, taxations, non-tariff barriers are discussed with a gender lens. There are very, very few in that, and that still remains a challenge. And there has been a lot of talk saying, can the FTAs look at more gender-specific recommendations that we could make and come up with, ideas where women can actually take the lead in the entire trade ecosystem. Even as a workforce, even if we look at the emerging technology workforce, I think there is now a push to really provide more digital information, digital skills to women, but the workforce is digitized. And unless we bring that digital information and knowledge to young girls at the schooling level and give them the access to, it's very difficult to train them when they are ready to jump into the workforce. There are a lot of programs that are happening, and I know a lot of corporates are doing it. We are a part of a lot of those programs, but the battle is harder if you're coming at 10 years later in that life cycle of digitization versus doing it now with providing that technical knowledge needed to be a competent workforce in a fast digitizing world, but also understanding the risks and challenges so that you can mitigate that space much more safely and successfully. Finally, I also think that when we look at, the social environment that women work with, and I think this was brought out, the burden of care, the burden of additional responsibility, the social norms, becomes very difficult for women to have a sustained career many times. One of the biggest challenges we are seeing in the tech field is women re-entering the workforce after a maternity break or a marriage. or they get married, move to another town, very hard to find the same kind of a tech job, tend to drop out. And tech progresses so fast these days. It's a 2 to 3, 6 months window, and the entire technology changes, that their re-entry becomes almost impossible unless consciously efforts are made to provide them a platform to relearn and upgrade their skills at the highest level to re-enter the workforce where they left it. Otherwise, they have to start their journey right at the bottom again and move out. Re-entering the workforce for many women, especially in today's tech world, is becoming a big challenge. Interestingly, just a few days ago, I was talking to one of my ex-colleagues and saying, "Where are you? How are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm getting married." I said, "Oh, what? Congratulations." And then he said, "I'm moving to Delhi, moving back to Delhi." And I asked him, "Oh, okay, so have you got a job in Delhi?" And he turned at me and said, and this was a very positive thing. He said, "No, actually, my wife is in the tech field and she has just had a promotion. And if I make her move out of that, it's going to be very hard for her to find a job in the city I am. So I'm actually putting my career at hold and moving to Delhi so that she can continue in her, tech journey, her career journey in the tech field that she is." And it's a telling statement that she wouldn't be able to move into another city to get a similar job because it's hard. Why is it hard? Well, one, I think the space for women to network within the tech is very difficult. So for example, the foundation, we run a program called STEM Connector, where we are globally trying to connect women in the STEM sector, those who are studying STEM and working in STEM, to set up a network amongst themselves, to understand the priorities and needs better, to talk about the challenges they face, the fears they face, the discrimination that they face, or the questioning that comes, but also the positive things. What's your next plan to be to be the head of your league in the tech side? So I think there is a lot that is required besides just policy and government norms. It comes with all the additional inputs that you can give as stakeholders, as development partners, as government, as think tanks, as academic institutions. That becomes important. Finally, I'm just going to conclude with one last small figure or a number that I thought was very interesting. Everybody knows about the Indian civil service, and we all know how difficult it is. And we know that the Indian bureaucracy is very critical to all the policy making, running the country, and the management of the country, like any bureaucracy. This time, interestingly, of the 1,009 people who succeeded or cleared the UPSC or the civil service exams, of, mind you, almost 1.3 million who applied, 13 lakhs was the figure, who actually sat for the exam. Only 1,009 got through. 284 were women. It's not a very large number. It's not even 50%, but it's a number which is rising up. But two other statistics: of the 5 top position, 3 were women. Of the top 25 position, 11 were women. Now, it's interesting to see so many women actually making that cut in a highly competitive exam space to take the top 3 spaces of the 5 and 11 out of the top 25 spaces. The next step would be, can we really have a focused engagement with this set of women so that they can become major contributors to the larger growth story of women, as they are going to be sitting on the policy seats? Can we also take the full 25, the men as well, and focus on them as well to create that understanding of what a gendered policy space would look like for a better integration of women into the economy? And I think it's always good to, move by examples. And I'm hoping that India, with its focus on women development, we hope that we can be able to do something more substantive in our economic space, not just the workforce and labor, but also with the industrial trade spaces that we are now so actively engaging in to really promote more women to become the leaders at this space. So I'll stop with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nandita. First of all, we at Dakshin, all of us from Dakshin, congratulate you that she was awarded the Prime Minister's Gold Medal by the Royal Government of Cambodia for her technical support to the Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitation for developing victim protection policies and practices. Congratulations from Dakshin for this, Nandita. Nandita, you have touched upon a very important point, and you have touched upon the very practical point for the SMEs, women SMEs, those who are facing all these problems like awareness, paperwork, and so like they have to fill up so much of forms and all, but they are not aware. Awareness is very important thing in this. And what I think is that Dakshin is a very good platform for all these. If we are focusing on women SMEs, Dakshin is a very good platform so that we can exchange all the best practices in all the Global South, whatever the Global South countries are doing, and we can also share what India is doing. We can have a separate session for that also, so that we can focus on practical problems and the solutions which India is also doing. Thank you, Nandita, for that. And now we are moving to our last speaker, Ms. Veena Bandyopadhyay. She is a social policy specialist in UNICEF, New Delhi, with over 30 years of experience in social development. She has made significant contributions to her work with the United Nations, international organizations, and bilateral cooperation. Her expertise spans social policy, strategic planning, and advocacy, with a deep understanding of poverty, gender, child rights, care solutions, and social inclusion. She has a wealth of experience across India and South Asia, driving transformative change and championing the rights of the most vulnerable. Serving UNICEF for over 2 decades, she has managed critical social policy and protection portfolio, leading to transformative policy changes through evidence generation efforts targeting children and women. At present, she is a social protection specialist in UNICEF New Delhi. And Veena will be focusing on redesigning the workplace of the future, family-friendly policy. Over to you.
Good evening, and thank you, Veena. It's an honor to be among the panelists which are here and online. At the outset, I would like to start with thanking you, thanking RIS, Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi and Professor Vasudeva for organizing this important workshop on such a crucial topic, which is at the heart of sustainable development in Global South. As we delve on the issue of empowering the future, women-led development for inclusive growth, we recognize that women are the backbone of economies. With this, we also have statistics to substantiate. Women contribute to 37% of the GDP in low and middle income countries. It's a power that no one can ignore, that is increasingly being recognized. Yet, gender disparities persist. Some of the only couple of statistics that is strong enough to make the statement: women earn 20% lesser than the male counterpart across the globe, and whether you go to any country. 76% women remain involved in unpaid care work. This is the scenario in which we are, and this is the potential we need to explore. As far as political participation, that too is very, very discouraging. The best in Latin America, with 35% women who occupy parliamentarian seats. The least in Asia, where 23% women only occupy parliamentarian seats, while in Africa it is 26%. This has a telling impact on policy-making processes, the way public and fiscal policies are designed, placed, and implemented. What does this mean? And I think I go to, and I'll give credit to India's G20 presidency, where the government of India and all the partners placed this women-led development agenda at the forefront, and it has now set the stage to the world community, and everyone is talking about it, and it is a great, great milestone. So investment in gender equality is a key to unlock full potential of economy in every country, every community, and world community. Increasingly, for Global South, there are 3 aspects that are being deliberated as a pathway for women-led development. One is care economy, which itself is huge, which I'll come to that. And second is digital divide. As many of earlier speakers also mentioned, that how this is not letting more women and young girls to participate, mostly because of education, literacy, digital gadgets, who owns it, who uses it. And third is women's leadership. Not many women are in leadership decision-making positions, CEOs or even the minister, or it varies country to country. So my today's intervention is around care economy, that too with reference to child care, and statistics suggest about 70% roughly and plus 70 to 76% of women's work is unpaid care work, which is child care, and which goes unrecognized, unrewarded, and unaccounted. And women continue to do this work since ages and ages, and there seems to be no end to it. It also, this kind of gender role is also being perpetuated by social and gender norms, and then gets reinforced and aggravated by additional thing when you have face economic barrier, when you choose where you invest in your child, girl or boy in education, you somehow tend to invest more in your boy child because that will be your great earner and supporter to family. Legal and institutional framework, when it comes to inheritance of property right, you can't even take credit, there is no assets in your name. Lack of education, forget about skilling and employment opportunity, because there are many, many more other roles that is expected from women, where your employment, career, and other things takes secondary. Some of the previous speakers also mentioned how women are challenged to re-enter the workforce. So I think entering the workforce, there are sets of challenges when you are skilled, educated, and compete and come to the workforce, because of child marriage, many other norms. Then you have second, when you are pregnant or childbirth stages in your core reproductive age group, which is peak of the career for men and also for women. Women are pushed back and they drop out. Even rest of the skilled, educated women drop out to look after their young kids, and they not find when it's faced. It's very hard to re-enter the job again. There's a lost opportunity. Many private sector partners and others do find it more expensive to employ young women with kids than to employ men. Maybe it's the social and behavior issue that also implication on other productivity issue, not proven by research, but mostly strongly believe that women could be less productive when they have child-rearing responsibility and henceforth. ILO has estimated investment in care economy can create 475 million jobs globally. Yet, this is still a discussion and debate what should be done. And again, I'll thank India to take the leadership on pushing this agenda forward. Only 2% of GDP can create 11 million jobs per year in India, of which 70% can go to women, which is I think can be a big game changer if we can do that. While job creation can solve half of the problem, part of the problem, there is no other set of problems which many of other speakers have referred. One is entering the job and then coming out of and not re-entering the job, and many. So the second set of problems, that is where UNICEF has a very clear-cut agenda, and we promote and advocate for family-friendly policy. Workplace has to be redesigned. The traditional caregiving structures are reshaping. We do not have families that earlier provided care support, like grandnanny, grandmother, granddaughters families. We are becoming more and more nuclear families, single parents, urbanization, and all of that. So, have we thought when we talk about care economy? So, one, you create jobs, that's very important. Other is you redesign your workplace structure. What you do, and to read is what you do then in redesigning. So UNICEF proposes and advocates for 7 measures for redesigning the workspace. So family-friendly policy aims to support parents and caregiver and care provider, and not mothers, not women, parents who are having caregiving role and care provider who in workplace should be supported to balance their work and family life. So the 7 key measures, the first one is paid parental leave, not maternity leave only. So paid paternal leave will provide equal opportunity to mother and father both to share the responsibility as they decide to do. Support breastfeeding tracks and infrastructure, a room where women can go and breastfeed the child. Flexible work arrangement. Man can or women both can opt for flexible work arrangement so that both can share the responsibility of caregiving, especially child care. Accessible, affordable, and quality child care is a dream in many South Asian countries, including India. While India has accelerated its effort, it's far too less because you have to have universal access to child care with quality and affordability. Everyone today, different economic state of women can afford different kind of services, and yet quality remains a concern, even if well paid, because you don't have professional trained workforce, and I'll not unpack, it's understood. We also, as a fifth measure, we also support and suggest government to go for universal cash transfer as child benefit or child grant, at least for first 1,000 days of life. So since the woman is pregnant till delivery and till 2 years. So this money provides some cushion to that woman if she doesn't work and she's laborer. There is some support for her to take care of the child and go for partly to work, if not full time. Parenting program is also something that UNICEF supports. Positive parenting, what we do, which also has a serious implication how we look after child, build the bonding between both the parents and all. And violence against children and women is also part of the program. Finally, coming to my second point, what I think we need to, as a group of this, and I will take the opportunity with other experts that are here to influence their mind and thoughts, and with RIS if it can be. One is, I think in India, what we have seen, at least in last 1 to 2 years, there has been expansion of cash transfer to women in reproductive age group. Starting from Tamil Nadu to Madhya Pradesh to now Jharkhand, 10 states of India, including Delhi now, 2,500 Indian rupees, which government during the election promised and now is implementing, is a great opportunity to influence how this money can be designed, cash transfer, to support care work and in lieu of unpaid care work to women. So I think that one of the research that we need to do, either as a group or RIS can lead, is what is the impact of cash transfer on reduced care burden on women, how this cash transfer is helping women to renegotiate care burden, how this cash transfer is helping adolescents not to drop out of school and getting married. So all of that. The other thing that I think we need to definitely in subcontinent and also in global south and India, there is a need to advocate for, because in introducing care economy as a separate pillar of service sector, where you allocate certain funds for building professional workforce, for building infrastructure, for building services. So if you do not have workforce, for example, if you have built a workforce of certain X million of men and women, anyone like can have a certified workforce. I can apply and pay and ask that woman to come in or man to come and support child care. So those are the options that we must look for. With this, I don't think I have many things to say. With this, I would like to conclude and again say thank you for the opportunity and look forward to discussing more and exploring more in this area.
Thank you, Veena. Thank you. You have touched upon your area, UNICEF, what UNICEF is doing, and these 7 points which you have given: flexible working hours, accessible child care, paid parental leave. These are quite important for us and will be incorporating in our reports. But I have a small query. Maybe UNICEF is working so much on things. There should be best practices must be available in each and every state. So you should, next time you can also focus on one best practices for care economy where UNICEF has done something significant. Sure. This is my thought. Sure. Thank you, Veena.
All right, so we have now finished our first section where we had speakers from mainly from India, but of course the perspective was global and also the global south. Now we have the second part of our workshop, which is we are getting the perspective from our global south partners. This is very interesting because from different countries people are working on these similar issues. And we have, I'm really glad that we have not just, we have 7 speakers already listed, but I'm glad that Dr. Mariam from Charles Center, Mauritius, she has also been able to join because earlier she was listed, but then she had written today morning itself that due to some other engagement, she may not be able to join. So she's also with us. So we have 8 speakers now. We are slightly running late, but the discussion has been so engaging. It was very difficult to stop anybody. So my request to all the speakers would be that if you can just make your initial intervention about 5-6 minutes or so, I'm sure it's very difficult to conclude your thoughts within those minutes, but that's. But I don't want to stop anybody. So we have a very interesting discussion now, which we are going to follow. The first speaker we have, Ms. Safat Ahmed Zahir. She is the founder and president, Women in Democracy from Maldives. She is the leading women rights activist in her country. In 2016, she established, this Women in Democracy, which is 100% youth-led. And she also received the Queen's Young Leader Award at the Buckingham Palace in 2016. And in 2017, named one of the Forbes 30 under 30 in Asia. She's really a leader in her country, particularly on the issues of women's rights. And she also, the major project which she has done was the Gender Equality Manifesto, where she's forcing all the political parties in her country to look into gender equality issues. So you can just go to her website and other things what she has been doing. But since the limitation of time, I invite Safat Ahmed Zahir to share her thoughts. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Dakshin, Global South Center of Excellence, for inviting me and our organization to participate in this important panel discussion, Empowering the Future and Women-Led Development for Inclusive Growth in the Global South. And I'm very happy to be joining with a lot of inspirational women who are working on a similar area, and it's very happy to be acquainted with you all. I'll try to keep very short and will not repeat many things that were similar, but yeah, even in terms of speaking in terms of the Maldives have made strides in terms of women's empowerment in legal frameworks, and the constitution also guarantees gender equality. However, the main challenges still persists in the representation of women in the political context, and of course the economic inclusion of women. And women still face challenges in terms of the growing amount of gender-based violence. So I think these are the 3 areas that is most important that needs to be addressed in terms of for women's empowerment in the Maldives. Interestingly, women are highly educated in Maldives compared to men. We have a 99% literacy rate, and women are almost twice as educated than men. However, women are still largely excluded in the political sphere and also in the economic sectors. And there's a huge disparity in income as well, as because women, mostly also women, are engaged in unpaid care work and in social sectors such as the NGOs. So in terms of the public and political life, we have made some improvements during in the 2020, in the last local council election, Maldives actually implemented a quota to ensure women's representation at the local council level. However, the local council election is next year, and we're not really very clear whether the quota will be continued, as the Maldives is not really ready to eliminate the quota at the moment, because it's very difficult for women to get into these positions. And if we can look into the figures of the parliament, almost in every term, we have one woman MP being, not being elected into the parliament. For example, in the first term, we had only 5 women MPs. Then we had 4 women MPs. In this new term, we only have 3 women MPs. And basically, in the 22 committees of the parliament, there's literally no voice of women, which actually really brings into a lot of problem into which brings actually attention to a lot of problem in terms of women's exclusion from policy making, and from, of course, implementing important government decisions and projects as well. So this is the main concern, and I think almost all speakers in India also highlighted similar issues. When speaking of Maldives, even in other countries of the global south, has really improved in terms of women's political inclusion. However, in terms of Maldives, we are unfortunately seeing a negative trend, except for the local council representation, because for the local council representation in the last government, it was gender interventions were implemented. And just very quickly on economic empowerment, as I highlighted, women are highly educated in Maldives. However, there's a huge need to support women, and of course, in the previous government, there was some SME loans which were facilitated for women. However, there's still a large gender gap in women's participation in the labor force, which is actually 42% compared to 75% for men. And this gap actually reflects structural discrimination, including the persistence of gender stereotypes and gender expectations, norms, and attitudes, which remains a significant barrier to women's equal economic inclusion. And also in terms of SMEs, and even in terms of women's entrepreneurship, we are seeing a huge disparity when compared to women and men. Our NGO actually really tried to identify many of these data, to even gather these data, because as a small country, these data are not really readily available, and sometimes we have to sort of collect this data on our own and compile this data on our own to actually produce something in terms of evidence for the policymakers. However, it has been very difficult, but according to some of the researches that we did, there's a huge disparity whereby women are involved in 30% in entrepreneurship, as opposed to men being involved in 70% in of course entrepreneurship. So those are the main issues. And of course, Maldives is also not immune to gender-based violence, and it's an endemic, I think, that is going on all over the world. Just this week also we had a case which led a huge public outcry. So I think systematic reforms need to be undertaken to eliminate all forms of violence against women. Thank you so much, and that's it from me. And thank you once again for inviting me and the organization.
Thank you, Safat, for very useful, very, very important inputs. In fact, as you mentioned, the issues are similar all across the world, and particularly in the global south, which we are discussing. So next speaker, we have Dr. Maria Risteska. She's the founder and executive director of the Center for Research and Policy Making, which has received the Japanese Medal for Outstanding Research and Development in 2016 and Cosmos Think Tank Award in 2013. CPRM is in Macedonia, and she's basically doing a lot of work on the gender budget And because she also serves director of the Gender Budget Watchdog Network, and she has been working with various multilateral organizations for the projects in the UN, EU, World Bank, EBRD, OSCE, and OSCE, and many, many others. Over to you, Dr. Istiska.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for organizing this webinar. It's a pleasure to contribute into the discussion of the Global South on gender and development. I'm not sure whether you are seeing my screen at the moment that I'm sharing. Do you? Yes. Okay. So I would like to speak on the topic of gender responsive budgeting.
Yeah, I didn't see. No, we can see. Yes.
Okay, good. I want to speak on the topic of the gender responsive budgeting and financial tracking of international development assistance. Why? As a representative of the Center for Research and Policy Making, as a think and do tank, which is based in Skopje, Macedonia, but we have programs around all Western Balkan countries, Moldova and Ukraine. And as an organization which is leading the Gender Budget Watchdog Network, which is open for participation, membership of all civil society organizations that have in their heart and mission to work on equal redistribution of public finances and fight for economic justice. We think that this topic of how we use international development assistance, especially at times when it's which are very challenging, which are actually showing a trend of decreasing international development assistance for developing countries. It's very important to know where these limited funds are going and whether they contribute to the to further gender inequalities or they are trying to close the gender gaps. So as Gender Budget Watchdog Network, a network of more than 100 civil society organizations that use gender responsive budgeting tools to monitor public finance, we have actually looked at international development assistance and its contribution to gender equality. If we look at the latest data of OECD on overall development assistance, we can see that in the last decade, actually the ODA
I disturb you, Dr. Maria. I think the slides are not moving. Can you just move?
They're not moving? Okay.
Because
maybe
seeing only the title.
Do you see now? Maybe are they moving now?
No, yeah, now it's there. Thank you.
Now you see OECD slide? Or we don't need actually to share, but it was, I think it is good for everyone to see. But anyway, I can continue. The OECD data from 2024 actually shows that in the last decade, the overall development assistance that was available increased quite a lot, significantly to fund actually gender equality objectives. We see that actually increase of funding where gender equality is a significant objective in the period between 2010 and 2023. This is of course measured with the help of the gender marker, which has been used by international development agencies to follow to actually track the funding for gender equality in international development. However, if we see the sector in which this funding has been distributed, we see that mostly the government and civil society are the ones that are using the funding, which is directed towards gender equality as a principal objective. While economic infrastructure services, businesses, banking, and financial services, they don't have gender as a principal objective. So the Gender Budget Watchdog Network has actually set up a methodology to assess how this, whether this actually financial tracking of international development assistance is enough to see the contribution of overall development assistance to closing the gender gaps, and how whether actually they are using the gender responsive budgeting tools in their operation. Gender responsive budgeting tools, because the gender responsive budgeting is a process that allows a more improved redistribution of public finances to respond to the different needs of women and men. And crucially, for this tool to be applied is to have capacity to do gender analysis of the interventions, actually to assess what is the impact of the financial framework that we are supporting on the equality between women and men. And internationally, there are two tools that are used to assess if governments are actually complying with the requirements to use gender responsive budgeting in their public finance management. This is the SDG 5C1 indicator, which is measured through three criteria, which are not really going into the essence of whether gender analysis has been done, but more have focused on the strategic objectives of the organization, the policy framework set for achieving gender equality, the systems for measuring the finances for gender equality, as well as the systems for transparency and accountability of the government towards gender equality objectives, actually financing of gender equality objectives. The second tool internationally used is the PEFA framework, public expenditure framework of assessment of public finances, which is more focusing on the way how the public finance management is governed, and whether there are gender perspectives included in all of the phases of public finance management. Some countries do apply these two tools, others do not, and this depends also on the commitments of the countries, whether they have committed to use gender responsive budgeting as a tool. Some countries like Austria have included it in the constitution, others have regulated it in laws and in decisions, but most of the international organizations are diffusing it and recommended it as a best practice of public finance management, because it provides greater equality for results for the countries that apply it. Internationally, all these countries contribute with overall development assistance to other developing countries, and they also have committed to use this development assistance for advancing gender equality goals. We are tracking internationally whether this has been done through the gender marker, and the OECD is the organization that is following the distribution or the overall development assistance for gender equality. The marker is tracking using three values: 0, which represents that the action has been assessed and will not contribute to gender equality; 1, which means that the action will contribute to gender equality at an objective level; and 2 is for actions that have a main objective where gender equality is one of the principal objectives. Actually, they will contribute also on output level. Whether they will contribute on output level, the OECD DAC gender marker does not measure, which is something which our assessment shows that is needed in order to close the gender gap. So the gender marker is not gender budgeting, but because it is applied on development assistance, which is public funding, we think that the overall development assistance should also apply gender responsive budgeting, because it is public funding that they are using. So we look at 3 cases: the EU, the UNDP, and the World Bank. And the assessment actually showed that all of these development agencies, multilateral development agencies, have policy commitments to gender equality. In example, the EU has committed 85% of its actions externally to contribute to gender equality. UNDP has committed to 70% of resources towards gender equality to be spent, and the World Bank has committed that 55% of its operation will meet a gender tag. But the analysis of the way how they distribute the money for different interventions using the methodology of the SDG 5C1 and the PEFA Public Finance Management Assessment shows us that actually this is not enough. Actually, by setting their strategies and global targets as a percentage of overall financing or actions, the multilaterals are focusing more on needs, more on numbers than on needs of the people, especially the different needs of women and men. And they do not use gender analysis in this process. So using gender responsive budgeting as a policy tool, which in its core has gender analysis, would improve the equality of distribution of the overall development assistance if multilateral agencies are using gender responsive budgeting rather than just gender marking. And this will allow for us to monitor how much of the funding actually is used for closing the gender gaps, rather than how much of the funding has some kind of gender perspective. The second conclusion that we are making as a network is that by facilitating monitoring on objectives level through the gender marker, we are overlooking the output levels contributions of the overall development funding, and therefore our recommendation is that the multilateral development funding should be tracked with 4 level markers to allow for knowledge on the changes for the equality status between women and men that happens as a result of the investment done through the overall development assistance. And finally, The monitoring systems that are set for in development agencies are actually following only disbursement rates and very rarely effectiveness and efficiency of spending, which do not really allow us to see the overall picture of the impact that is being achieved with the expenditures that they have made. So our last recommendation is to actually link the financial targets with gender equality impacts in order to improve the distribution of funding that is available, development funding that is available for developing countries to close the remaining gender equality gaps. Thank you for listening and join our networks webinar at the end of May, where we will actually more in-depth present our methodology and results that we have achieved around the Western Balkan region.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. I mean, I think it was very useful for all of us others, I mean, to know about the intricacies of your gender responsive budgeting and how useful it could be. So I'm sure others will benefit from the kind of work you are doing, and we'll be happy to share, your presentation, which you are not able to make, to our partners. If you share with us, we'll share with all our partners and anybody who has participated in this workshop. So next speaker we have from our partners from Argentina, Sofia Fernandez Crespo. She's a sociologist and she's Chief of Staff at the Center for the Implementation of Public Policies for the Promotion of Equity and Growth, CIPPEC. Her focus is on gender gaps and women economic autonomy and the impact of early childhood development and growth. Over to you, Ms. Sofia Fernandez Crespo.
Hi, everybody. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks, Rise and Daxin, for the invitation. And thank you for the previous co-panelists for such a fruitful discussion. I think this workshop is really necessary in a context where the agenda is facing many setbacks globally and especially in Argentina, where I'm speaking. So I'm representing CPEC, as it was well stated. CPEC is Argentina's most relevant, independent, non-partisan and non-profit think tank. For those who are not familiarized with CPEC, we produce knowledge and offer recommendations to build better public policies that promote a developed, equitable, and inclusive society, as well as robust democratic and public institutions. So what I would like to share with you today are some insights on gender inequalities in my country and share some policy recommendations that result from our experience and applied research and technical assistance to public administrations. So as it was stated by many of my co-panelists throughout the workshop, gender gaps affect women's access opportunities, and they limit our exercise on our rights and affect our quality of life in many dimensions. But I want to focus on those that affect our economic autonomy, especially. So even though we face gender gaps throughout all of our life, have different intensities depending on the stage of the life cycle. And therefore, they demand different policy responses to be tailor-made to the needs of each cycle. So in Argentina, during childhood and adolescence, gender gaps are almost non-existent, as boys and girls have similar levels and they experience similar poverty rates. School enrollment rates and coverage of state transfers show no significant differences between genders during the early childhood. But however, in the adolescence, especially between of 15 and 17, inequalities begin to emerge and manifest more intensely. The main reason of this is the unequal distribution of domestic and care responsibilities among genders. Time use surveys show that adolescent girls spend on average 4 hours on these tasks compared to less than 3 hours of young boys. On the other hand, during adolescence, choices around academic and career paths begin to take shape. And basing on gender stereotypes, mainly, young girls tend to not study careers in the STEM field, which happen to offer better wages, better job opportunities, and they are the most dynamic sectors in our economy and those that have greater potential for innovation. So this leads to women remain underrepresented in the most strategic sectors later on in life. And then in adulthood, gender gaps become more pronounced. And this is because women shoulder the lion's share of unpaid care work. In Argentina, the figures are 6 hours and a half per day for women. And this figure is only 3 hours and a half for men. So this unequal distribution is the main driver of women having less participation and worse labor conditions. And then this leads us also to the paid care work, where women are also overrepresented and where they get lower wages and higher rates of informality. So just to share some data, in the second quarter of last year, these disparities show in the female employment rate, which was 61%, compared to the 6% for men. And female unemployment, on the other hand, was 8.6, while men unemployment rate was only 7%. So in older adulthood, gender gaps persist due to these accumulated inequalities. And this leads to women receiving lower average pension benefits and having worse life conditions in this state. And for example, in September 2024, male pensioners receive an average benefit 20% higher than their female counterparts. So we see these gender gaps throughout the life cycle. But however, and this was also mentioned before, these disparities are really intertwined and they interact with each other and reinforce themselves. So as I previously said, this requires specific policies for life stage. And here I would like to share some specific set of policies that contribute to both boosting early childhood development and reducing gender inequalities. Because when we talk about gender inequality, it's not only an aspect of human rights and a moral imperative, but also they are very beneficial to economic growth and sustainable and inclusive growth. So the first set of policies I want to share is on building and strengthening comprehensive and coordinated care systems based on 3 pillars: time, money, and care services. When I talk about time, I mean promoting equal redistribution of unpaid care work because among genders, and mainly through parental leaves that support the co-responsibility in caregiving and housework. In Argentina, we have the shorter leave absence for fathers, only 2 days. So the second pillar is money. Cash transfers to ensure a basic income to households that have children, to guarantee that they are not deprived of any resources or services that they need to develop the key capabilities in the rearing age, where it's key to for them for the future. And the third pillar is care services. And this, I mean, quality education, health, and social services to guarantee that the population's care needs are catered for, and to prevent deepening pre-existing inequalities. So the second set of policies there has to do with recognizing, measuring, and evaluating the care work contribution and the economic contribution to growth and development. And this has also been mentioned before. A lot has been said about the importance of the care economy and how it's mainly unrecognized and accounted for. According to estimates from the World Economic Forum, unpaid care work compensated, it would represent 9% of the global GDP. In Latin America, this figure would be even more important. It would account for between 5.7% and 24% of the regional GDP, making it one of the largest sectors to contribute to the economy. And with this, I would like to share an experience, a tool that CPEC has developed that is called the Basic Care Basket. This innovative policy is a synthetic indicator which estimates the economic value of care work and helps identify care deficits. So,
sorry to disturb you, Sophia, could you conclude, because we have many speakers right now.
Just one last minute. So this indicator has been carried out in one of the biggest cities in Argentina, and the good news is that it is replicable and escalated to other cities and countries, but they identify in the territory where the care deficits are and help the allocation of public resources to be more efficient. And to conclude, just a comment on women representation and female leadership. CPEC is also being part of a campaign that is called 1 for 8 billion that advocates for the next United Nations General Secretary to be a woman. And it also seeks to strengthen the global South countries' participation in this election process. So I invite people to look check the campaign, and of course to contact me to inquire of the campaign and about CPEC's work. So thank you very, very much for the invitation and for the food of thought.
Thank you, Ms. Sophia. I mean, I think it was very useful, particularly you made the focus on care economy, and earlier also we were discussing, Veena was also mentioning about how important this is. So next speaker we have from Central Asia, Mr. Greg C.E. Rollins. He's the IICA representative in Trinidad and Tobago and coordinator of regional integration for the Caribbean region. Prior to this posting, he also served as the chief economist at the government of Barbados, senior project officer with CARICOM Secretariat, and consultant and with Mediterranean FAO. Over to you, Mr. Greg Rollins.
Mr. Chairman, I hope you're hearing me clearly.
Hello.
Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Let me say good morning, or good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And to start by thanking RS and Dakshin for this opportunity to share some of our perspectives in the Eastern Caribbean. I hope you are able to see the presentation on the screen.
See presentation.
Wonderful. You're seeing the presentation?
Just seeing the front page, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to be very brief. I'm going to share some perspectives from the Eastern Caribbean. I am Greg Rollins, as you indicated. I am based in the island of St. Lucia, here in the Eastern Caribbean. And I work with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. I should say a little bit about ICA, the institute first, so that you understand where we are coming from. We are the specialized agency for agriculture within the Inter-American system. Our mission is to promote and support member states in their efforts to achieve agricultural development. Our headquarters is in Costa Rica, and we have 34 member states across the Americas. In the Eastern Caribbean, we have 6 offices in Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts, Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent, and I have responsibility for those offices. And while we are not an institution that is primarily involved in gender and women issues, we do recognize the important role played by women in the agricultural sector here in the Caribbean region, and more specifically in the Eastern Caribbean. And in fact, throughout the region, women are at the forefront of the agriculture development process. They work not only in the areas of agro-processing and in the areas of value-added and marketing and so on, but they are also actively involved in the area of production, at the level of production. So women play a leadership role and a very dynamic role in our agricultural sector here in the Eastern Caribbean. In terms of our programs, we have a program in the Institute that deals with women and youth in agriculture. And the idea is to strengthen the role of women in agriculture and rural life in the Americas, relying on innovative capabilities to meet the demands of the member states. We also promote youth leadership initiatives. So we do twin women and youth as one program. I should also indicate that we create a lot of our focus is on creating spaces and building organizations where women in agriculture can network, share experiences, cooperate on business ventures, and advocate for differentiated public policies that support their integration and development. In that regard, at the hemispheric level, we have established what is called a permanent forum of female ministers and senior authorities of the Americas. And this is a space where we create platforms for inclusive policy conversations, and we also highlight the contributions of rural women to development. In terms of organizations, we have worked with a number of organizations supporting their efforts. For example, we have groups like Helen's Daughters that is based in St. Lucia. It also has chapters in St. Kitts and Nevis and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And this is a nonprofit organization that empowers rural women through agriculture entrepreneurship and leadership training. And we've worked with them over the years to help them in advocating and pushing for women development. We also have established, ICA has been at the forefront of establishing what is called the Caribbean Network of Rural Women Producers. This is a mechanism where at the CARICOM level, the Caribbean level, we have chapters in various countries where women can come together and work together to support their efforts in terms of the development of their businesses, the building entrepreneurial spirit, seeking cooperation, networking, and so on. And this network has a number of chapters in various countries across the region. For example, we have chapters in Antigua and Barbuda, in Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent. And these organizations basically bring women together and advocate for women's interests. In all the countries, we've been doing a lot of work in relation to capacity building. We have been working with the women in Antigua and Barbuda, for example, in supporting their efforts in the development of cassava and sweet potato bread making. We have also supported them with refurbishing and electrifying their agro-processing facilities. So a lot of our work is based on working with these organizations to help them to improve the facilities that are available to their members so that they can engage in the value-added processing and so on. We also, in the case of Dominica, have been working in developing a micro-enterprise, a microfinancing scheme for women in the agricultural sector. The idea is to offer women terms of finance that allow them to be able to manage effectively those loans and finance schemes. And this is an important initiative that we have undertaken through collaboration with UNDP. We've also, again, been supporting women in establishing pulping, juicing facilities, a lot of training in market study tours where we take them from one country to the other to see what they're doing. And generally, we are working with women throughout the Eastern Caribbean in these organizations to have a lot of capacity building and training. We also have a program where we identify leaders in rurality across the Americas. And what we've been discovering, we've established criteria that are used to determine who will be awarded as a leader in rurality. And I can say to you that in the case of the Caribbean region, and specifically in the case of the Eastern Caribbean, practically every leader in rurality who has been appointed or who has been nominated has been a woman. In fact, there are very few men who have actually been identified. And this is not a program that is gender-based. This is based on strict criteria in terms of their contributions to rural development. And therefore, the message this sends is that women in the rural space in the Eastern Caribbean are at the forefront. They are the ones leading development in the Eastern Caribbean, even more so than men. And this is something that we believe that we need to continue to support because we recognize that they have a tremendous role to play. So we have 2 leaders in rurality currently awarded, one in Grenada and one in Dominica. Both are women. And in all the other countries in the Eastern Caribbean, the nominees are women except for very few men. And this sends a very strong signal in terms of the role that women play. So, as ICA, as an institute, our role is basically to support their efforts, to create the spaces where they can express themselves, where they can advocate for policy, and also network and build sustainable value chains that can create sustainable livelihoods in the communities in which they operate. That is our key role, and we see this as an important part of the development process for agriculture in the region because we see women at the forefront of this process. Thank you very much for the opportunity once again to share these perspectives. And we welcome again the collaboration with Dakshin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. It was very, very useful to really know the kind of work you are doing in the Caribbean region. And as you have brought out to the notice that women are at the forefront as far as the area in which you are working in the rural development and agriculture. And I think it's very interesting to know that the kind of things which are happening all across the global south. We have almost finished our time, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 more speakers with us. So I'll just request the remaining speakers that if you could just limit your initial intervention to about 5 or 6 minutes, so that we can actually have some time for some discussion. Otherwise, we may miss that good opportunity. So next speaker, we have Dr. Madina M. Guloba. She is from EPR's. She's She's an economist and she's a senior research fellow at the Economic Policy Research Center in Uganda, Uganda's leading policy think tank. In fact, just 2 weeks back, we had a very bilateral discussion with EPRC on the digital public infrastructure and how countries, India and Uganda can do certain things together. And she's also the member of the National African Statistical Society and secretary to the Uganda Economic Association. At EPRC, she was also project coordinator for the Uganda Human Development Report. And many things other she is doing, and many of the projects she has done with the various organizations. Over to you, Dr. Madina Buloma.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So good evening there. Here it's an afternoon. It's 4 coming to 4:30 in the afternoon, probably evening. Good morning to some people out there. So as to speak to the topic and the theme of empowering the future, the women-led development for inclusive growth. In Uganda, for sure, we do not lack policies that support women. I don't even want to go in there. Actually, in Africa, I think we are looked at as a country that's pioneering women in terms of policy initiatives. Now, the issue is the impact of these initiatives on ground. I think that's one of the things we need to interrogate. Sorry, as I'm in a conference, so I was hoping for people to keep it low. So ideally, as a nation, we are not shy of good policy framework, and in terms of legality, ideally, even the country puts aside certain positions for women. A third of the women in parliament are for women. So then the other elected positions are free for everyone to participate. So ideally, even our prime minister and the vice president, these are women. So the president is in for women in terms of leading. Now, the issue is, are they felt on ground in terms of the impact, in terms of if they're looked at as role models, in terms of what they do? So we can't have women in positions of power, but they need to have that kind of impact on ground to change the mindset of other people, the young girls, young women, to see if they're really actually performing and not actually being looked at as persons who just support the processes that are ongoing. So that's something some food for thought. And then even in our cabinet, the cabinet is full of, the president has been really intentional on trying to ensure that women are in political issues of influence. And in terms of positions of power for development institutions that are on ground. But in terms of participation, we've seen still women being, labor force participation being high, but employment population ratio for women being still low at around 38%. Compared to women, which is 52%. And this is highly given to issues around education participation and the issue of focus here being around issues of unpaid care work that has made many women stay back in the labor force. And we've also seen that government has also increasingly put to task all institutions that are actually coming in for resources or budgets, that these budgets must be gender responsive. And depending on how gender responsive your budget is, you'll get a gender compliance certificate. That's how serious it is. So in case you are really, the budget is engendered, then the institution or the ministry will get a gender compliance certificate to ensure that they are actually meeting and being equitable and compliance in terms of transparency to bring women and young girls on board. So we're not doing badly there. So now coming to the part where EPRC has done some work, we've seen that government has increasingly put in lots and lots of efforts in terms of government programs that are women targeted, youth targeted. We have the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, the Youth Livelihood Program, even the Parish Development Model, which is inclusive to everyone. Then they recently brought on board GROW, that's growth opportunities for women, led by World Bank. So it's targeting high-end income women. That brings them some bit of financial support. Because if the issue is financial inclusion, then these are trying their best. But what we are seeing is uptake is still low. With all these initiatives, uptake for women to come and borrow these free interest loans is still very low. So that's one of the things we're asking ourselves, why the low uptake when there is willingness to ensure that they foster, they build this woman, this young girl, to ensure that she's more empowered. And we did a novel research, a NARA-CT, which a randomized control impact evaluation research on social aspects to see what really is happening. So we did an impact evaluation research with K International and Makerere School of Gender Studies, and we tackled issues around mindset change and behavior. So that's what the interventions we are looking out for. If we look out for institutions of power where women are belonging, let me say savings groups, and then bring on board men who are champions within communities, what will happen? So what we saw that when you actually tackle the issue of mindset and behavior and attitudes, it's a way of tackling the stereotypes that have been bent that if you're seen borrowing money, then you actually don't looked at as someone who's not being compliant to the norm and the identity of the woman as a woman who's going to do business. Then when you look at out for the man who's actually trying to support the woman in trying to ensure the care work within the home is redistributed for her to participate in work, then you look at these champions of change. Whereas they're trying to foster this change as men and boys, the actual persons who are deterring their support efforts are actually women. You know, if a woman is seeing a man helping someone in the household, they're actually the deterrents of change, that they mock the man, they mock the young boy, and they mock fellow women who are not doing and behavior in terms of behaving in the correct way. So when we had several discussions around these have to foster in terms of changing the mindset even of women as the deterrence of change for fellow women to participate in businesses, and in terms of bring on board men and boys to participate in unpaid care activities while at the same time engaging in paid activities. So to cut it short because of time, I think going forward, if we want to see more women in participation, we need to tackle on issues around behavior and mindset. We need to look out for interventions that know enough to change this identity of thinking that this is what you are meant to do, and then to make sure we bring them on board. And this is a very slow process. Social norms are slow and very sticky. So tackling them in a slow sense is very critical to ensuring that women are brought more in terms of participating in the world of work without being ridiculed or without being titled that, oh, you are now wearing trousers, which you should not be wearing trousers, or you're now trying to push out the male child. But while at the same time bring on board the male child, because these move together. You cannot deal with an empowered woman without educating the man to deal with an empowered woman. So these issues have to move in tandem as we move together. So as governments, we need to design and be more forward-looking. As technology is taking place, we need to use this kind of technological innovations and spaces to ensure we bring and educate women and men to be more aware on how best we can support each other within our communities to change the mindsets around the social norms that are ingrained but can be changed. They are not defined anywhere. So these are things that people think. So where there are no definitions, we can change these definitions, but with research and evidence that can support these narratives. Yeah, I submit.
Thank you, Dr. Gulova. It was, I think, the point you made was, apart from other things, that how do we really, unless there's a change in behavior, thinking, etc., which are also much more important than all the technical other things that we have been discussing, you have also brought up. So next speaker is from Mauritius. She has joined later, but in fact, this is the way it was there in the original program. Dr. Mariam Glynn. She's head of Charles Telfair Center in Mauritius. She's a gender economist with more than 15 years of experience, and she has done many of gender-related and other kind of work. And she holds PhD in economics from the University of Manchester. Dr. Glynn, please.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I'm very wary of time, so I won't spend too much time, but just to say that I head a Short Affairs Center, which is a think tank based in Mauritius that focuses on knowledge sharing in the West Indian Ocean region. But as indicated, I'm here today more in terms of the work I do as a gender economist. And I'll just briefly go through, the gendered landscape in Mauritius and two key research that we have done that hopefully will give you a snapshot of what gender evolution has taken place in the country. So I don't know if you can see the presentation I'm sharing, but I'm just showing these pictures of Mauritian women through history. And I think they're a very good image of the changes that have taken place in Mauritius. There has been huge transformation, structural changes in the position of women in Mauritian society. And these structural changes have mostly happened through education and work and access to work and therefore access to income.
Hello.
Yes? Yeah, good. So if you look at this graph here, you can see that there has been in the early years after the economic shift in Mauritius toward an export-oriented industrialization strategy, a very rapid feminization of the labor force. And I want to start here is because it's through this feminization of the labor force that took place in the 90s and 80s and early 90s that structural changes in terms of perception of gender roles, in particular perception of women as position in the public sphere, started to change in Mauritius. And so Mauritius is a perfect example of how economic change, economic policy has an impact on social structures and the social fabric. Just another thing I want to highlight in that graph is how we had another phase of defeminization during the COVID period. And I think this is something that has happened across the board. But in Mauritius, a lot of women left the labor force once faced with the double burden of having to work from home during COVID and looking after the household. This was recuperated since, and we're back to 47%, which remains a relatively low female labor force participation compared to its peer. And I'm going to come to that in the next slide. What you see in the slides is really a snapshot of Mauritius' gendered landscape. In Mauritius, girls are better educated than boys, and they actually do better in schools in terms of results. And this has been the case for more than 15 years. And therefore, we should normally see that better performance in education translate into economic outcomes for women. Actually, we don't, or in decision making. If you look at the data, we still have a female labor force participation that's 47% compared to 70% for men. We only have 27% women in management positions. That includes middle and senior management position. Women still spend a disproportionate amount of time on unpaid care activities compared to men. In Mauritius, it's 4.5 per day compared to 1.5 for men. The gender pay gap in Mauritius stands at 28%. And in decision making, in the government sphere, we only have 18% women in parliament and 8% women ministers. And so the main priorities in Mauritius, we're doing really well on education, we're doing really well on health, but in terms of economic participation and decision making, we're actually very much behind, and we're behind our peers, the other countries that are at the same level of economic development. And of course, the main barrier to women accessing more economic opportunities and women accessing greater position in decision making, or the patriarchy and or social norms and gender norms in Mauritius that remain extremely rigid, despite increased visibility of women in the public sphere. And I just want to highlight two pieces of research that we have done. The first one was a piece of research that was trying to understand how women in Mauritius were negotiating barriers, either barriers set in terms of the public sphere or barriers that are set within the private sphere through religion or social and cultural norms. And what we found is that women in Mauritius exercise what we call a patriarchal, ethnic, and modernity bargain. In Mauritius, there's this internalization that the need to preserve peace between community is very important. And so women use that internalization to divert from conflict when they were faced with different forms of structural violences, whether they were open aggression or more subtle microaggressions, or pressure to abide to certain norms. And they adopted what we call adaptive strategies and compromise. Whether it was education or professional success or network or assets to negotiate outcomes, they used these to negotiate compromised outcome. So, you know, an example is a woman wants to enter the labor market and there is pressure from the household. And so a Muslim woman might compromise and say, okay, I'll wear the hijab and that will allow me to enter the labor market. So that negotiation of boundaries and barriers is done using their agency. And that was very, very interesting. So what we found is that religion and culture is both experienced as a resource for empowerment, but also characterized by boundaries. And the way they experienced the boundaries was actually quite flexible, mobile, and hence porous. In other words, women tend to shift the boundaries depending on the context. So for example, again, I'll take a woman who might be prescribed particular clothing by their culture. And they would abide to that clothing, for example, in immersion context within the family. But then in another context, for example, if they're at the beach, they would actually no longer abide to that clothing because they would consider that they're in a different setting. And this is what we call about porous boundaries and porous barriers, and how women negotiated the social pressure around particular expectation of how they should dress or how they should behave, and how they adapted depending on the context. For us, what was very strong about the research is the level of agency that women were exercising in the face of different barriers and boundaries that they were facing. This agency is something that we need to capitalize on as we're trying to push away from traditional gender norms and patriarchal structures that prevent women from accessing essential resources in Mauritius. So that was the first piece of research I wanted to share about. A second piece of research is there has been some changes in Mauritius in terms of how the private sector is the worst offender when it comes to gender equality, much worse than the government sector. But in the last 5 years, a rising number of private sector organizations in Mauritius have integrated gender DEI and DEI more generally in their ESG agenda. And parallel to that, the government has set a 25% gender quota on listed company for boards. And this has meant that there's been a shift a bit in the private sector. And now private sector companies are increasingly trying to implement gender transformative programs to increase the proportion of women across the board, but of course also in leadership. And so we collected data among 3 corporate organizations that had set gender targets and that had initiated gender diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And we looked at, only at senior level, the change in behavior from senior leaders as a result of this change in strategy from their organization. I don't have time to go in the details. We developed tons of different persona from resistance to championing, and I don't have time to go in the details of this, but I just want to highlight some of the key findings of this research. The first is that in the context of Mauritius, we found that there were more resistors, either active or passive resistor, or people who would just comply than there were champions. And I think this is a reflection of how far we still need to go for individuals to actually intrinsically believe that gender equality, gender parity, or fight towards gender equality is a worthwhile cause. There still seems to be a belief that that is not their problem, it's somebody else's problem. Also, in the face of resistance within the organization, we found that organizations were more successful towards change. First, when leaders had a clear vision and an intrinsic motivation, when it was clear that the leader in the organization truly believed that gender equality mattered. We also found that when communication around inclusion was normalized, this actually led to greater success in terms of shifting behaviors of their senior leaders. And also we found that when you actually found a way to include the resistors in the change, and I don't have time, but there are ways you can include the resistors in the change, even sometimes in small ways. It allowed them to be part of the process, and then it allowed the change to be more successful and allows senior leaders to buy in to the changes being initiated through their DEI policies. So these are two snapshots of research that we have made, which I think show two things. First, that Mauritius is moving. There are changes happening. There are organizations trying to change the course in terms of women's position in the Mauritian economic landscape. Women are also exercising, they've always exercised agency, but the way they're exercising agency is shifting and is louder and louder. And I don't have time to go into that, but there is a much louder and voice of women in the public sphere in Mauritius than they were 10 years ago. So, you know, is Mauritius at a shifting point? I think so.
Could you just conclude, please?
Sorry?
Would you just conclude in next one?
Yeah. So, so yes, I think we are at a shifting point. There is a rising voice of women in Mauritius. There are the patriarchal structures are being challenged. There is a large inflow of women into the labor market that are educated and that are making demands to the workplace in Mauritius. And the private sector and the government is increasingly approaching gender as a priority area. So it's a space to watch, and we'll continue to collect data on these changes moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Blaine. I'm sorry, I just had to cut you short, but since we have two more speakers and we have already got much ahead of our time, but the discussion has been so interesting that it's really difficult to stop anyone because it has been such an interesting finding. And thank you so much for sharing the kind of research you are doing in Mauritius and in your center. Next, we have, thank you. Next, Mr. Mahmoud Ahmed is Executive Director, Djibouti Reflections, here, Djibouti Space for Reflection and Exchange. He's expert on civil society organizations in the Horn of Africa, and also as a political and social analyst and trainer expert to counter narratives on violent extremism organizations. Mr. Mahmoud Ahmed, please.
Hearing me? Just say if you're hearing me or it's okay?
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Mahmoud. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this space today and inviting me. And I have I learned a lot of things from previous speakers. I will be brief, just to make you understand how Djibouti is and how women empowerment is. Djibouti has made a lot of progress since 20 years now, or let's say 30 years now, because we have 25% of women in our parliament, which is 16 women in 65 the parliament, Djibouti parliament, and we have 7 ministers are women. So it gives you more already in a decision making. Women are somehow there, but there is a lot of work to do also in the sense of bringing women all inside of autonomization, power of economy, and giving them the voice, institutionalization of the voice of women. That is a lot of things to do, especially in advocacy. So now in this period, we are very busy to create a women leadership networks. We have 5-6 regions in Djibouti. So what we're doing is to create a 6 chapter of women network for leadership, so that they can advocate the rights. All that was something to do with women and advocate the issues, the rights, and all that things. So sorry that I'm very French speaking, so I will try to speak English as I can. If you don't understand me, you just let me know. So what I say is, when you see in Djibouti, in the rural area and the city, there is a gap of women has in the autonomization or the work or information, even capacity building. There is always a gap. So what we're trying is to reduce that gap, bring the rural women to have more resources, more capacity building, and let them to understand how the development is and how they can participate in development. That's why we're trying to create that kind of women network for leadership network. And we have also here in Djibouti what we call a national policy of gender, which is specifically talking about the women, and they have a 6 axis to promote from 2024 until 2027. It's a 5-year plan, which comes from the Ministry of Women and Family, because we have a ministry run by a woman, Ministry of Family and Women and Family, and it's run by a woman. So that plan, national plan, is every 5 years we review and we see what has been done, what has been not done, and we do the evaluation with the ministry. We try to create awareness how we are not, where we have not been efficient in our work. So in that 6, if I take it 2 or 3, it's autonomization, fight for GBV, what we call, because you know, the gender-based violence is very high also. That's something that we're working and doing the awareness, so that the women understand the right and understand where they have to go and how they have to deal with the violence, if that is the case. So it's a lot of, even in the society, we have to train the police, we have to train the civil society, we have to train the women, the victims, and we have to put protocols. And those protocols is put in by the UNFD, it's a national NGO for women, that the first lady is the president of Honorary, and it's a big NGO, which is have the support of the government and work directly with the Minister of Women and Family. So I can say there is a lot of things that have been done in Djibouti, but in the meantime, there is a lot of things to do to promote the rights of women, to promote also the career of women, where they can have easily to be a higher ranking in civil servants, for example. And education, there is what we understand Djibouti, for example, the same post, there will be equal remuneration. So the salary is the same, whether you are a man or whether you're a woman. If you have the same post, for example, if you are director, you will have the same salary. There is no the gap of salary in Djibouti between women and men. So that is also one of the things. And it's not something who begin now, it's something who has been always there. So if I can say that, that is what we're doing here in Djibouti, for example, in our institute. We're working a lot with the youth, because we think that the youth has to be the next who may lead this country, whether they are man or woman. So we're giving the same chances. They are access to our institute equally, and we're trying to reinforce them, their leadership, whether it's entrepreneurship or leadership or motivation. So these are the work that we're doing really, and we're trying to create the next generation where there is no difference between gender, between man and woman, so that they can have the same chances, they can they can do the same things, they can have the same dreams, they can have the same job. Those are what we're doing really. So I will finish my statement over there so I can give a chance for the exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I mean, this was very useful to know your national policy on gender and how your Ministry of Women and Family is doing the kind of work you are doing. And I think others would be very interested to know more, perhaps, what exactly is happening in your country and what kind of efforts and policies you are implementing. So the last speaker we have, Mr. Salim Said Salim. He's Executive Director of the Somali Institute of Development Research and Analysis, SIDRA, and he has been, he teaches constitutional law, human rights, administrative law, and criminal law. And you know, we have very good partnership with SIDRA, and we are really grateful that, you know, you have participated in many of our earlier workshops also. And we really look forward to listening to you, particularly on the women-led development in Somalia or in your region. Mr. Salim, please.
Thank you so much for Rashkin for inviting us this valuable conference or training. Also, thanks to other distinguished guests and colleagues. Yes, Somalia, as everyone knows, is characterized by prolonged civil war, and now it is in post-conflict situation. In this regard, historically, Somali women have played important role in community cohesion, conflict resolution, and informal economies or informal trade. After in this post-conflict situation, women became one of the most affected by the civil war, and they became most vulnerable groups. But in the post-conflict reconstruction, women take an important role in households. When I say households, this means that the civil war did not erode the economic infrastructure only, but also it led that many women take on primary breadwinners roles in the community. But at the same time, women have become very active in some of the grassroots level initiatives, in terms of NGOs, in terms of peace building initiatives, even in terms of state building, women has been part of it. However, if you compare their important role to the reality on the ground, we can find that women's role in formal decision making is very limited because of the clan-based power sharing, which is based on patriarchy. So this patriarchy, which is dominated by traditional elders, always exclude women from decision making. In the federal parliament, according to the practice, there should be 30% of quota, but currently we have less than that quota. We have almost 20% of women MPs. On the public servants level, also the number is very low. When it comes to education, so what exclude women from the development and from the decision making is several factors. One factor is literacy is very high in women. Only we are talking about 25% of Somali women go to primary school. 65% will not continue their basic education. So this is one factor. Whenever women are less educated, means that their contribution to economy, their education, their contribution to political, their contribution to development at large is very limited. Another factor also is another factor also coming from the poor. Somalia is one of the poorest countries, but women also they are the poorest. So only some studies, our studies show that women control or dominate only in the informal trade or informal economy. For example, 70% of the informal trade are run by women. But when it comes to other uh, middle and bigger size businesses and economies, women number is very less, or their role is almost non-existent. When it comes to equality, Somalia is I think, yes, Somalia is fourth globally countries who are lowest in equality. Four countries. Somalia is one of the lowest when it comes to equality index. So, coupled with because of this patriarchal system or clan-based system, coupled with these factors, also in the health system, Somalia is one of Somalia has the highest marital death and also infant mortality. So sometimes 10 years ago, or if we look at the previous reports, they say Somalia is one of the worst countries for women. That's the word. But what I know is for the last 10 years, the situation has been, at least, there has been a kind of improvement. Based on our observations and our studies, to empowerment to women, for example, Somalia, women is more than half of the community. And without having women on board, this means that we cannot reach sustainable development. Because if we include women, this means that we have more equitable development, we have more community-centered development, and also we have more sustainable development when women are part of the process. When it comes to the policies, there is no much problem in the policies and in Somalia. But the problem is the de facto aspect, not the de jure aspect. If you look at the National Development Plan, if you look at the Constitution prohibits all forms of discrimination, all forms of violence against women. But the problem is that there is still a huge gap between enforcement and implementation. When it comes to labor, women has, as I say, mostly they work in the informal trade. And we are talking about that there is no friendly women environment or decent work environment for women. Yes, there is no, for example, in Somalia, we don't have the problem of wage discrimination. But when it comes, for example, paid leave maternity, it is a question. The health sector always, they don't want to hire women because of that they need maternity leave, paid maternity leave, something like this. For our recommendation, I can say that the most important for women to have women-led development. The most important is to empower women economically. Because when the women are economically empowered, this means that they have more education, access to more education, they have more access to labor, they have more access to decision making. We are clan-based society. I know that some clans, when the woman is rich or is a business woman, even the traditional elders call those women to attend their meetings. Why? Because maybe they need to contribute some of their economies to the clan and to facilitate some work. So when the woman is rich, means everyone knock at their door. So to empower women economically is one of the conditions for inclusion of women in development. The second recommendation is enhancing women's participation in education. When we have more women educated means that we have more women participation in development and decision making. The third thing is, for me, is to expand the opportunities for microfinance. Because countries like Somalia, where poverty is very high, and women are the most vulnerable groups, microfinancing is for me is a technique that could enhance women's participation in development. Another thing I think is to reform and to develop and improve women's property rights. Yes, as I said, our laws are mostly women friendly, but I do know that some laws need some reform, like the family law, like civil law, because a civil code, because some of our property rights mechanisms are very old and outdated, and they need reform so that they can improve women's access for example, land tenure, for example, access to, for example, the issue of ownership of properties between the husband and the wife, something like this. But almost, yes, there is a legal problem, but I think that implementation also is very important when it comes to property rights. Because
Salim,
we have to notice that in agricultural sector.
Could you just conclude, please, Mr. Salim?
So, for example, agricultural field, very few women have agricultural land and utilize them. Yes, they work in the agricultural land, but when it comes to ownership and control and use, they have nothing to do. So almost I can conclude that yes, there are many factories excluding women from development in Somalia. And this exclusion needs more comprehensive efforts by the national government and international community to address these structural barriers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Salim. So we have, it's very interesting to, know the situation in Somalia and also in your region, how kind of, policy relevant things are there. And, how women participation, as you said, is very, very important for the whole economy and also for the society. We have, already gone 45 minutes above our allotted time. We had some time we kept for discussion, which I don't think we'll be able to do it because people are in different time zones and somewhere it's pretty late in some places. But we do have at least 2 or 3 minutes, if not more. Sneha Bansal, she is here, participating and very patiently listening to all the speakers so far. And she has some specific comment, or she works on G20 and UN and other related issues and follow things in the global south. Ms. Nehaman.
Thank you, Mr. Gulshan, and thank you to all the speakers. I was one of the negotiators at the G20 and specifically for women-led development. I want to just start off and just a quick couple of points, each of which will be a discussion in itself, but I know we are tired at the end of the session. Professor Chinoy said something very important at the beginning of this session, which I think is that we need to make a distinction between gender inclusion, including women in several things that need to be done, and women-led development, which is women setting the agenda for development. I think these are two very different things. Now, the inclusion of women is perhaps a social economic issue, whereas women-led development, in my opinion, will be a political issue. And we saw that during the G20. In fact, countries were very divided on this particular topic. And if you look at the communique on the G20, women-led development actually isn't even a heading of a section. It's in the text. And this is essentially a reflection of the fact that even within the Global South, there is a lot of division on women-led development. And therefore, we will have to approach it very sensitively, looking at the differences within the Global South on this. Secondly, I want to say that I think there are, it seems to me, two populations of women when we are talking about even women in labor. One is women coming in on the necessity to do a job. The other is women coming in on choice to do a job. And that is something that we will have to take into account increasingly. A lot of the Global South countries are seeing rapid economic growth. And with that, you will see a new development, which is that with rising economic growth, you might have a situation of more number of women falling out of the labor force, essentially because, now the choices with them, they find that the jobs available to them are not commensurate with the kind of status not necessarily economic status, but not necessarily the necessity for job, but the kind of status that they enjoy, the kind of status that their families enjoy. So I think there's something to look at in terms of the demand side, and I think Nandita Barua from the Asia Foundation made some very, very important comments on that. Third, and most importantly, I think we're also seeing a demographic change. So it is not just about women in the care, in the childbearing young age group. Increasingly, we will have to have policies for women in the elderly age group. In fact, there is a combination of increasing poverty as the age of the woman increases. So we will have to look at, again, Nandita mentioned this, break in careers, but those breaks may not be necessarily due to bearing children. They may be because, they had to stay away from the, labor force for some other reasons and are coming back very much later in their careers. So that's the other thing. And I have a whole lot of points, but I won't bore you on this. But the last bit is, of course, we all know we have to bring in the men. And it's not, when we bring in the men, I don't think it's just the socio-cultural aspect. Gordon Brown, Prime Minister of the UK, former Prime Minister of the UK, he's been working in Afghanistan on a program called Education Can't Wait. And he says that when dealing with men, we have to recognize the fact that there is fear playing among men. And that is going to be, in many cases, in many situations, our binding constraints when we look at women and their inclusion, or women setting the agenda for development.
Thank you, Neha. It was very, very useful. In fact, it was also useful for me because now, we don't have much time, or in fact, there's no time for discussion now. We will definitely continue this conversation with all of you on this issue. In fact, already I was discussing today with a couple of other participants and people who are part of a network. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we will be specifically following on women entrepreneurship in the global south. And on that, we'll build on, how specific policies on the entrepreneurship, development of entrepreneurship. I'm really thankful, many of you, Nandita, I can see you continue to drive. You are somewhere driving or sitting there and still continue to listen to these conversations. Thank you, all of you. I don't have to really conclude now because you have also, Neha, made very important points. So those are also a useful thing to kind of wrap up this discussion today. But 2 or 3 points, which one, Nandita is with us, she mentioned that one is that for the women-led development, we really need to work at multiple levels. It doesn't really work just at one G20, we say women-led development, and then things just go in a very different direction. Then the point which has been made by many, and in fact you also mentioned that point also, technology is changing so fast. And for women, when they just move out, even for a very brief period, it becomes very, very, and continuous training anyway is a lifelong learning kind of process. We are not there yet, and particularly Global South definitely is not there yet. Yes, those kind of recognitions are there in the European Union and many other places. Even there also have difficulty in implementing, but here it's a long way, but that's what one needs to do. And then, of course, the issues of gender budgeting and other things, these are, of course, the policy relevant things which we'll continue to discuss. So these are kind of things we have taken today, and it was very, I think, for us that so many of our partners responded very, very positively. Since this was the first initiative for us, without really much of capacity here on those issues to follow this, and you are our strength, you have really made this task much easier for us, and then we'll move on and work on this particular area. And so these are, thank you very much everyone who has participated, but since it's pretty late, may I now just invite Tanya Singh to just say a few words of thanks to everybody. She is the one who has really worked very hard for this particular workshop, and we are kind of training her to work in this particular area, because this is, we find that, you know, the things which are related to gender must be linked with all our verticals, whatever we are doing in agriculture or health, anywhere else. But we also need to specifically discuss also gender empowerment, women-led development, and all other issues together. Tanya, last word for you.
Thank you, sir. So, dear esteemed speakers, participants, and everyone present here, it is my great honor to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of Dakshin, the Global South Center of Excellence. So today's workshop helped us understand that women-led development is not just a good idea. It is necessary for building fair, strong, and inclusive communities. And we at Dakshin believe that empowering women as leaders, innovators, and change makers is key to shaping a better future across the global south. So I would like to thank all our Indian speakers for sharing their knowledge and experiences, for setting the tone with powerful and thought-provoking insights on the transformative role of women in development. Also, I want to thank our speakers from the Global South for bringing rich cross-regional experiences and ground-level practices into our shared space of learning and dialogue. Your ideas have helped us better understand how we can move forward and work together towards a more inclusive and equitable future. A special thank you to Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Chief Coordinator of Dakshin, for guiding our vision through his thoughtful and encouraging remarks. Also, I want to thank Ms. Veena Bandyopadhyay and Dr. Neha Bansal for coming in person and sharing your thoughts with us. A warm thanks to Dr. Beena Pandey for moderating the session so well and helping keep the discussion focused and engaging. I would also like to sincerely thank the entire Dakshin team for their constant support in curating this workshop. And most of all, thank you to everyone who joined us today. Your presence and participation made this event meaningful and lively. So thank you once again, and we look forward to your continued support and collaboration. Thank you.
Our, the team, communication team, I know we have been keeping here till 8 o'clock, and they have been very, very patient with us all the time. And of course, the whole RIS team as well, because without their support, we wouldn't have really done what little we are doing. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.